On one side, there is nothing but the hunger, and on the other side, there is nothing that is not love. And I spent 7 minutes crossing between them. My name is Daniel, and I need you to stay with me for what I'm about to tell you, because I am not going to just describe what happened to me the night I overdosed. I'm going to take you through it, step by step, the way I lived it. Because what I was shown on the other side was not just for me. It was for every family sitting in a hospital hallway, or around a kitchen table, or staring at a phone they're afraid to answer, watching someone they love disappear one piece at a time into something they can't fight for them. If you're new here, subscribe. What I share on this channel comes from a place most people never come back from. And if this is the kind of conversation that means something to you, I want you to have access to every one of these stories. And before I go any further, drop something in the comments. If you have someone in your life who is struggling, or if you are the one who is struggling, just say so. Even one word. You don't have to explain it. I'll tell you why that matters before this is over. Now, let me take you back to the night. It was a Tuesday in November. I know it was a Tuesday because I had just gotten off a 12-hour shift at the warehouse, and Tuesdays were always the hardest. Long enough to feel like punishment, short enough that I still had energy left for the wrong things. I was 34 years old. I had been using for 6 years, not casually, not recreationally. The way a person uses when using is the only structure left in their life. When it's the first thought in the morning and the last calculation before sleep. My family knew, my mother knew, my sister knew. My ex-wife had taken our daughter 2 states away, and she knew too. They all knew, and they had all done what families do. They had cried, they had pleaded, they had set ultimatums they didn't keep and drawn lines they crossed anyway. Because that is what love does when it runs out of options. It keeps trying. Even when trying looks like enabling. Even when trying looks like silence. Even when trying looks like turning your back and then turning around again in the middle of the night because you can't stop checking. I want you to understand what my family's love looked like from the inside of my addiction. I want you to understand it because what I was shown in those 7 minutes is directly connected to it. From inside, their love felt like noise. It felt like pressure. It felt like a spotlight on everything I already hated about myself, amplified and unbearable. I did not experience their care as care. I experienced it as a mirror I couldn't look away from. And because I couldn't tolerate what I saw in that mirror, I used more to make it go dark. That is the mechanism. That is the trap. And no one inside it can explain it clearly because you cannot see the walls of the room you are living in. That Tuesday night, I was alone in my apartment. I had been alone for most of the previous 3 months. I used and then I used again, and then something went wrong in a way I had been warned about and had never quite believed would happen to me. And then there was nothing. Just nothing. 7 minutes. That is the number the paramedics gave my mother when they finally let her into the hallway outside the trauma bay. 7 minutes of clinical death. No heartbeat, no respiration, no measurable brain activity. 7 minutes in which the body that had been running on fumes and chemical dependence for 6 years finally stopped. My mother sat in a plastic chair in that hallway for those 7 minutes, not knowing whether she was the mother of a living man or the mother of a body they were about to wheel into a different room. She told me later that she didn't pray in words during those 7 minutes. She said the prayers had run out. She said all she could do was sit there and feel what she felt, which was a love so enormous and so helpless that it had nowhere to go. It just filled her. It filled the hallway. It filled the space between her and the door she could not open. My sister was in the parking lot on the phone with our aunt in Ohio, trying to explain what was happening and not quite managing it. She kept saying, I don't know, because she didn't. Nobody knew. That is what 7 minutes of clinical death looks like from the outside. It looks like not knowing. That is the vigil. Not the dramatic one, not the one in movies with candles and soft lighting. The real one, fluorescent lights and plastic chairs, and the specific silence of people who have already spent years grieving someone who is still technically alive. I want you to hold that image, because what I was about to be shown was a direct response to it. Here is where language starts to fail me, and I am going to ask you to do something unusual. I am going to ask you to follow me rather than just listen, because what happened in those 7 minutes was not a series of events that can be summarized. It was a journey. There were distinct places. There were things that had to be passed through before the next thing could be reached. The first thing I was aware of was the absence of the hunger. If you have never lived with addiction, I want you to understand something. The hunger is not just a craving for a substance. It is a frequency, a constant low-level vibration underneath every thought, every conversation, every ordinary moment. After 6 years, I had forgotten that there was a before. I had forgotten what silence felt like in my own body. The hunger was just the background of everything. And then, in an instant that had no warning, it was gone. Not suppressed, not numbed, gone. As if it had never existed. As if I had stepped out of a room where noise had been playing at full volume for so long that I'd stopped hearing it as noise, and into a silence so complete and so clean that my first reaction was to weep. Not from sadness, from recognition, from the cellular memory of what it was like to be a person who was whole. And then the light. I am not going to tell you it was white. I have heard other people describe it as white, and I understand why they reach for that word, but white is the absence of color. What I moved toward was not the absence of anything. It was the presence of everything, rendered as light. And it communicated. That is the thing I need you to understand about color on the other side. It is not decorative, it is not atmospheric, it is a language. What I encountered first was a gold that meant something specific. Not the gold of metal or wealth or warmth in the way we mean warmth here. This gold meant you are recognized, you are known. Not your name, not your history, not your choices or your failures or the 6 years you spent turning yourself into something unrecognizable. You, underneath all of it, the original thing, the part that was placed in you before you were born, that is what the gold recognized. I moved toward it, and as I moved, the weight that I had carried for so long, not just the addiction but the shame underneath the addiction, the original wound that the addiction had grown out of, it did not lift the way a burden lifts when you set it down. It dissolved, as if it had only ever been a misunderstanding. The next color I encountered was blue, but not the blue of sky or water. This blue meant, you are not alone in this. This blue had texture. It was the color of every person who had ever suffered and been held in it anyway. It was the color of company. I want to call it compassion, but compassion is too small a word for what I was swimming through. This was something structural, something woven into the nature of that place the way gravity is woven into this one. And then I arrived somewhere, not a location exactly, a presence. I am going to be precise about what I saw and what I heard, because I think precision matters here, and I have spent a long time making sure I am not embellishing. What I encountered was a figure, a man, though that word is also not quite right. A presence that presented as a man, because that is the form most legible to a mind shaped by human experience. And the moment I was in front of him, I knew exactly who this was. Not because he introduced himself, not because he matched any image I had seen in any church I had attended half-heartedly as a child. I knew him the way you know something you have always known but have never had access to. The recognition was total. He did not speak first. He looked at me. And the looking was, I need you to understand this. The looking was the most complete thing I have ever experienced. He saw everything. The warehouse, the Tuesday nights, the 6 years, my daughter's name which I could not say out loud without breaking something in my chest, my mother in the plastic chair, my sister in the parking lot. He saw all of it. And the seeing contained no judgment. None. Not the absence of evaluation. I want to be clear about that distinction. He knew exactly what all of it had cost. He knew it better than I did. And he held all of it, and there was no judgment in the holding. That was the color of his presence. If I had to name it, I would say it was a green that meant nothing is wasted. Not the green of growth exactly, though that was part of it. The green of meaning. The green that told me that even the worst of what had happened had been held, had been witnessed, had been woven into something larger than my ability to see. And then he spoke. And what he said was not for me alone. What he said was for every person in every hallway, every parking lot, every kitchen at 3 a.m, who has ever loved someone they could not save. He said, "They are not invisible to me." Those words. I need to stay with them for a moment before I move forward, because they landed with a weight I was not prepared for. He was not talking about the addicts. He was not talking about the ones who were lost inside the hunger. He was talking about the families, the mothers in the plastic chairs, the sisters on the phone not knowing what to say, the fathers who have gone quiet because quiet feels safer than saying the wrong thing again, the ex-wives 2 states away who still check the news from their old city before they go to sleep, the daughters asking questions their parents don't know how to answer. He said, their love is not wasted. He said, what looks like helplessness from inside that love is not what it looks like from here. He said that the love of a family who keeps showing up, even when showing up does nothing visible, even when showing up looks like another failed conversation, or another unanswered text, or another holiday that ends too early, that love moves in the person who is lost, even when they cannot feel it, even when they are defending against it, even when they are using it as a mirror they can't stand to look at. He said, I see every vigil. Everyone, not just the one in the hospital hallway. Every night a parent lies awake, Every moment a sibling decides to call, and then decides not to, and then calls anyway. Every birthday card sent to an address that might not even still be good. He sees it all, and he holds it, and he says to every family, "Your love is not disappearing into a void. Your love is landing somewhere, even when there is no evidence that it is landing. Even when the person you love is doing everything in their power to make you feel like it is not." He showed me something then. This is the part that took me the longest to be able to put into words. He showed me what addiction looks like from the outside of time. Not the timeline of a life, not the sequence of choices and consequences and interventions that the people around an addict can see. He showed me the thing underneath the timeline, the terrain that the addict is actually moving through. It looked like a landscape. Dark, yes, but the dark was not malevolent. It was more like fog, dense and disorienting. And inside the fog there were people. People I understood to be people like me, people in the grip of the thing. And they were not walking toward anything. They were circling, the same patterns, the same loops. And you could see from outside the fog that there was an opening, a direction where the fog thinned, but from inside it was completely invisible. And around the edges of that landscape, not inside the fog but close to it, were the families, standing at the edge. Some of them had been there so long they looked exhausted. Some of them had stepped back a few paces, not because they had stopped caring, but because they had learned that standing too close could pull them in too. And the figure beside me, Jesus, I am going to say his name plainly because that is who it was. He looked at those families, the ones at the edges, and what I saw in his face was something I can only describe as the specific grief of someone who loves both parties in a tragedy and cannot impose resolution on either one without destroying something essential about what love is. He said, "Free will is not a loophole. It is the whole point." He said that the ability of a human being to choose, including the ability to choose destruction, is not a design flaw. It is what makes love possible at all. If he removed the capacity to choose badly, he would also remove the capacity to choose well. And then what would any of it mean? He said, "I do not stand at a distance from this pain." He said that what the families feel, the helplessness, the grief, the exhaustion, the guilt that somehow attaches itself to them even though they are not the ones who are using, he said he feels all of it, not as an observer, as a participant, as someone who has loved people who walked away and kept loving them anyway, knowing the cost, refusing to stop. He said, "Tell them they are not alone in it." And then I was back. Not gradually, not the way waking from sleep works. One moment I was in that presence, in that conversation, in that impossible green light that meant nothing is wasted. And the next moment I was flat on my back in a trauma bay with a tube in my throat and someone pressing my sternum hard enough to leave bruises I would discover 3 days later. 7 minutes. The nurse who eventually sat with me told me it had been 7 minutes, and the way she said it, with a particular quiet in her voice, told me that 7 minutes was not nothing. That 7 minutes was the kind of number people talked about in the break room afterward. I spent 4 days in the hospital. My mother sat in a chair beside my bed for most of them, not talking much. She had said everything she knew how to say in the previous 6 years, and she knew it. She just sat there. And I looked at her sitting there, and for the first time in a very long time, I could feel what her presence was. Not as pressure, not as a mirror, just as love, specific and stubborn and older than either of us. I thought about what I had been told on the other side. I thought about the vigil. I thought about what it looked like from outside the fog. This woman at the edge of the landscape, standing there, exhausted, not leaving. I could not say everything that had happened to me in those 7 minutes. Not yet. I didn't have the words, and I wasn't sure she would believe me. And I wasn't sure I believed it myself, in the way you have to believe something in order to say it out loud. But I reached across the distance between my hospital bed and her chair, and I put my hand on her arm and I said, "I know you never left." She looked at me for a long time, and then she said, "No, I didn't." That was enough. For that moment, that was everything. I have been in recovery for 2 years and 4 months now. That number matters to me the way the 7 minutes matters to me, as an anchor, as a structural fact around which I build my days. 2 years and 4 months is not a long time in the context of a life, but it is a very long time in the context of what I came back from. I think about the families often. I think about you. Yes, you specifically, if you are watching this because someone you love is in the fog. I think about what it costs to keep showing up. I think about the way love can look like failure from the outside. The way staying in contact with someone who keeps choosing the thing that is killing them can look to other people like codependence or weakness, or an inability to accept reality, when in fact it is the bravest thing I know of. The willingness to stay present in the face of evidence that your presence is not making the difference you need it to make. I need you to hear this because this is what I was sent back to say. Your love is not invisible. Not to the person who seems not to feel it, and not to the one who showed me what families look like from the other side of time. The colors on the other side were not decorative, they were information. And the information was this: what you do in love, even when love looks like standing at the edge of a fog watching someone circle in it, that matters. That is woven into something. That is not lost. The 7 minutes changed me. Not because I saw something terrifying, not because I was threatened or warned in the way I expected, but because I was shown what my mother looked like when I was not there to witness it. I was shown what love looks like when no one is performing it for anyone. And it was the most specific, most plain, most honest thing I have ever seen. Here is the one thing I want to ask you to do when this video ends. Not a list, not 5 steps, one thing. Think of the person in your life, the specific one, you know exactly who I mean, who is in the fog right now. The one you have been trying to figure out how to reach, or whether to reach, or whether reaching is even the right word anymore. Think of that one person, and reach out to them today. Not with a plan, not with an ultimatum, not with a carefully worded message you've revised 14 times. Just reach. One sentence. One sentence that has nothing in it except the fact that you are still there. That's it. That's the CTA from the other side. Because from where I was standing, in that green light that meant nothing is wasted, the single most powerful thing in the landscape of human connection was not the grand gesture. It was the quiet, stubborn, unremarkable fact of someone still being there. Someone who had not decided that the cost was too high. Someone who sent one more message into the void, not knowing if it would land, not requiring proof that it had. I was in the void, and it landed. Every time. I just could not tell you so from inside it. I am telling you so now. My name is Daniel. I died for 7 minutes on a Tuesday night in November, and what I was shown in those 7 minutes was not a vision of heaven designed to make me feel better about my choices. It was a message, a specific one, addressed specifically to you. God sees the vigil, every single one. If you are watching this and something in it touched something real in you, leave a comment. Tell me who you're thinking about. Tell me what you've been carrying. You don't need to explain the whole story. I'll understand whatever you say. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. These conversations matter, and I want to keep having them with you. I'll see you in the next one.